Alright, so let's talk about where these pollutants come from. So we will focus in on those 6 criteria pollutants that are monitored and regulated by the Clean Air Act. So if you lump all of those 6 pollutants together, then these are the main sources of them, and then we will talk about each one separately. So the main sources, number one, power plants, where they combust fossil fuels. So that would be the power plants that are generating electricity, and these generally burn coal, natural gas, or some of them can burn oil. Another huge source is transportation, and so that's mobile combustion of fossil fuels. So that's where you're burning gasoline or diesel fuel in engines, and that can include cars that me and you drive around, or also these big tractor-trailer trucks. All of them are burning fossil fuels. That's creating these criteria pollutants. Agriculture is another big source. Um, Not only when you dig up soil, that's putting particulates into the air, but also all the fertilizers and the tractors that are running to till the soil or to harvest things. That's all creating different. Those are all different sources within agriculture of pollutants. Dust is huge. A big source of dust is construction, but also agriculture. So that's why if you go by a construction site in an area that tends to be drier, you'll see the water trucks spraying water on the surface because dust is regulated and they have to keep down the amount of dust that goes into the air from their site. Industrial processes, so this is like manufacturing plants, they produce different types, mostly NOx and VOCs. And then fires, so forest fires are a big source of particulate matter, but they also give off other pollutants. And of course there's many more sources, but these are the primary ones that we are concerned about and that we are trying and regulate and or control in some way. Oh, I forgot that picture was there. So here's a volcano. So this is the more. So volcanoes also put ash into the air. If you live in an area that has volcanoes nearby, and you've ever seen that ash floating through the air, you know that that also is a source of particulate matter and potentially other pollutants. So I wanted to start with a success story so that we don't feel like everything's terrible and we're putting all these pollutants in the air. We are being successful at regulating and decreasing pollution through the Clean Air Act. Lead is a big success story because lead used to be emitted in large amounts when it was added to gasoline, and so they started removing it in the 80s, and by 1999 it was completely removed from gasoline, and so during that time lead levels in the air dropped by 94%. So a vast majority of the lead that was going to the atmosphere um, is no longer going in because of gasoline combustion. So now the main sources of lead going to the air, mobile transportation is still a big source because of piston engine aircrafts and other piston engine motors. And then ore and metals processing and lead smelters, those also, so that's industrial, those also put some lead into the air. So of these criteria pollutants, each one has a different source, primary source. So nitrogen oxides, or NOx, the primary source for these is mobile transportation. So when we combust fossil fuels in cars and trucks, that's putting a lot of NOx into the air. And then fuel combustion at power plants, so that's electricity generating power plants, like natural gas combustion, that's also a big source. So these two together make up most of the pie for NOx. Carbon monoxide, at least half of it's coming from cars and trucks, and then another big source of it is fires. So it depends. If you live in an area that has a lot of forest fires, you're going to have more carbon monoxide going into the air. Particulate matter, a big source of it is forest fires, but also dust. It depends on where you live and what is around you. So do you have a lot of dust that goes into the air, or do you have good moist soils with lots of vegetation, then you're not going to have as much blowing dust. Um, Fires, though, again, where do you live? And then agriculture is another source. Sulfur dioxide, almost all of sulfur dioxide comes from coal-powered electricity generating plants. And so that's more than three-quarters of the pie for sulfur dioxide. So if you get rid of coal-powered plants, then electric plants, then you're going to get rid of a vast majority of sulfur dioxide that's going into the air. And why do we care about sulfur dioxide? Because it reacts in the atmosphere to form acid rain and other. It's a highly reactive compound, or molecule, so it forms other things too. Ozone is the criteria pollutant that we said is not formed directly from any one source. It is formed in the atmosphere when nitrogen oxides react with volatile organic compounds, or VOCs. And so the major source of ozone is the source of NOx and VOCs. So we said NOx comes primarily from motor vehicles and also from electric power plants that are burning fossil fuels. And then VOCs are coming from gasoline vapors and chemical solvents that go into the air. And so when you combine those together, that's when you get the ozone. And ozone is the main component of smog. Ozone is particularly nasty because it can be blown long distances from the source. And so even if it's being generated in an urban environment, as we see here, it can blow off into the countryside where crops are growing, and then it can damage crops. And it can also affect people living in suburbs and more rural areas.